I was no different than any of these other designers. Some of those other designers may have been better designers than I was,
Mm-hmm.
but because I positioned myself as a specialist in branding for podcasters, all of a sudden work just kept coming in, coming in, coming in. Word would spread. And next thing you know, my name wasn't being passed around with a bunch of people. My name was the only one being mentioned.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show laser focused on inspiring you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posavy, author of The Way Success Works. While starting or growing your side hustle, do you ever feel like a small fish in a very big pond? Well, that was Mark Des Cotes in the expansive world of graphic design. Until one day, he saw an opportunity to niche down by jumping into a much smaller pond. For him, it was the best move ever. Niching down can seem counterintuitive. You might worry about losing potential clients. Mark's story may just be the thing to change your mind. In his case, revenues have grown exponentially since making the jump. Mark shares the strategic way he transitioned, offers tips for gaining more clients, and as a bonus, reveals telltale signs of amateur graphic design mistakes that we need to avoid. But before we dive in, if our chats are sparking your entrepreneurial spirit and providing valuable insights, consider showing your support by visiting sidehustlehero.com/support. That's where you can shoot me over a virtual coffee. It's a real thing, and it's a fun way to give the show a caffeinated thumbs up. Now here's my conversation with a now big fish, Mark Des Cotes. Welcome, Mark.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Joan. Glad to be here.
Well, your full-time work was your design business, but it serviced people and companies from across all industries. I want you to tell us how you niched down and started a side hustle, because I feel your story is it's a great idea generator, perhaps a source of inspiration for someone who's been struggling to nail down what their side hustle could be, or who is working their side hustle but not gaining traction and they need to somehow tweak it.
Sure. Well, my side hustle is actually doing the same thing that I was doing before.
Okay.
And that's where it's kind of unique in a sense, is I was running a graphic design business. I started in 2005 running a graphic design business. And I decided that I wanted to start a second graphic design business as a side hustle. So that is kind of a unique take that maybe your listeners are not thinking about, is you can start a side hustle doing the exact same thing that you're currently doing if you enjoy what you're doing. So what I decided to do is, my original design business was, I was graphic design, web design. I was doing it for everybody and anybody, all industries, small, large, and I loved it. I'd been doing it for a lot of years,
Okay.
and I really loved it. Then in 2019, I'd been podcasting for a long time too. I got into podcasting in 2013. And I was really into the podcast space. And in 2019, I was asked to speak at a podcast conference, Podfest Multimedia Expo in Orlando, Florida.
Okay.
And I was asked to speak on the importance of having good design for your cover artwork for your podcast. That wasn't my first conference. I'd been to many podcast conferences before. And I started to be known as, oh, Mark is a graphic designer. If you need help with your artwork or anything like that, Mark is somebody that can help you. Or there's this person over there who's also a graphic designer, or there's
Right.
this person over there who's also a graphic designer.
No shortage of graphic designers out there in the podcast world.
Yeah. So my name was always passed around as,
Yeah.
This Mark and all these other people
Right.
are podcasters, but they're also graphic designers and they can help you. So a couple of weeks before going to speak at the conference, I thought, is there anything I can do to like differentiate myself? So on the spur of the moment, I decided that I was going to start a side business, a side gig that would be offering the exact same thing I was doing to all my regular clients, but specifically niching down for the podcast space. Now, your listeners, I'm sure they're familiar with the term of niching or niching. They say the riches are in the niches. I'm Canadian, so I pronounce it niche.
Okay.
But the whole point of is you focus on one aspect of an industry. So I decided to start a completely separate business, as opposed to taking my business and just saying, here's an additional service I offer, that I do podcast cover artwork.
So from a potential customer standpoint, they look at it and it's like, okay, this person is an expert in this area. So you're not
That
trying to
was the point.
Right. Okay. Got it.
So I started a second business doing graphic design as
Mhm.
and in my mind, this was a side hustle. I launched a website 2 weeks before the conference, podcastbranding.co. I designed the website. So when I went to the conference and I spoke, I self-named myself a podcast design specialist. So
Okay.
when I introduced myself, I said, I'm Mark Des Cotes. I'm a podcast design specialist or a podcast brand specialist, and I'm here to talk to you. Well, from that point forward, all of a sudden, when people talked about who can you hire, there were this graphic designer, this graphic designer, this graphic designer, or you can have Mark who specializes in
Wow.
this.
Smart.
And all of a sudden, I started getting more and more people contacting me because they wanted the person who specialized. I was no different than any of these other designers. Some of those other designers may have been better designers than I was,
Mm-hmm.
but I had positioned myself through this side business that, and I thought this side business was going to do a little bit of work, maybe bring me a little bit of extra income.
Right.
But because I positioned myself as a specialist in branding for podcasters, all of a sudden work just kept coming in, coming in, coming in. Word would spread. And next thing you know, my name wasn't being passed around with a bunch of people. My name was the only one being mentioned because
he's the go-to guy now.
yeah, like Mark is the guy that designs for podcasters, as opposed to you can hire any graphic designer that can design it. And that was in 2019. By 2021, my side gig was now earning me more income than my design business that I'd
Wow.
had since 2005.
Wow.
And today, I could say that over 90% of my business is done through that. So my side hustle, if you want to call that, has now become my main business.
Right.
And I still run my other design studio almost as a side to anybody who is not in the podcast space. But now I'd say almost all my clients are in the podcast space. But it's just to show your audience that you could start a side thing by choosing a niche or something related to what you're already doing.
Especially,
you don't have to find something completely different.
Exactly, because you've got the skill set going into it. Particularly if you see something happening in the market that it could potentially blow up. I've seen that in a number of my Side Hustle Hero guests, is they came across an opportunity that was just like at the beginning of this wave. And when you're talking about those years in 2017, 2019, podcasting really started to ramp up.
Yes.
So you've got more and more people in that
exactly.
space then to take advantage of that opportunity. Yeah. So good for you for spotting that.
And something that your audience may appreciate too is because I had positioned myself as a specialist, I was able to charge more than other people. I remember there's a company in the podcast space, Buzzsprout. They're one of the popular podcast hosts. And they write an article and they update the article every year to say, like, if you want to start a podcast, here's everything. It's like a very in-depth article on how to start a podcast. Well, one part of that article is you need cover artwork for your show. And in the article, they mention, the last time I looked, there was 5 people mentioned. And I remember contacting them at one point and saying, hey, I'm not on that list. Can you add me? And they graciously added me. Now, out of the 5, they mentioned like Fiverr and 99 Designs, which are, they're companies out there where you can hire somebody really cheap to do design. You give them an idea and then they give you something and that's it. You've got no back and forth in that. But what I started finding out from my clients is, first of all, out of the 5 listed, I was the most expensive on the list, but I was more expensive by quite a bit.
Interesting.
And 2 other graphic designers that were, and when you link to their websites, they were graphic designers that did everything. And they included that they did podcast artwork.
Okay.
But when people came to me, I always ask, my order form says, why did you choose me or how did you find out about me? And if they told me they found me through that article, which a lot of people do, then I would ask them, well, can I ask why you chose me amongst the others? And they said, because you were the more professional. You were the one who specialized in this. And they were willing to pay sometimes, like in some cases, 3 or 4 times the amount.
Yeah,
to hire me because I had positioned myself as a specialist in that niche.
Wow. I mean, I know it's going to depend on the potentially on the client and what you're doing, but basically for that design, you're looking at what, around $1,000, 1,500, something like
I
that.
know honestly, I'm charging 295 US.
What?
So $300 for my artwork.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Okay.
and other people were charging $60, $80 for artwork, which
Really?
is, I mean, it's stupid. I mean, you can go to Fiverr and you can get artwork done for $15, or they say five, but rarely can you get something for $5 these days on
Yeah.
Fiverr.
It's really grown up since
But you
then.
can get
Yeah.
stuff really cheap. But people
Mhm.
wanted to come to me because they felt that they were going to get better service out of me.
Right.
It was going to be more professional. The way like my website was designed, they said you looked like a pro. I had the credentials that was listed on my website to show,
Mhm.
and I was positioning myself as a specialist. And again, this is the exact same niche. And
Right.
the thing about niching is I've got a graphic design community with lots of people, and we always talk about how, a lot of money can be made if you niche down. You can be very successful if you niche in any industry, not just graphic design, any industry. They say the riches are in the niches. But a lot of people say, well, I don't want to alienate the other people. I don't want to niche down to, do only this group of people or this thing, because what about everything else? And people got to remember that just because you niche down doesn't mean you can't, doesn't mean that you
Right.
turn away everything else.
Yes.
If somebody from outside the podcast space comes to me, I still have my other company. I could charge them through them. I could still charge them through podcast branding, but I've
Sure.
got my other business that I can do.
Yes.
So that is one mentality that I find a lot of people, they don't realize that just because you niche doesn't mean that you can't do everything
Right.
outside your niche as well.
Right, because you kept your existing business up and going and running and all that. This was an add-on. This was a side hustle per se.
Yeah.
So you just created a completely different space and I guess personal branding for that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's smart. Great way to test the market too.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I had already started to build a little bit of a name for myself as Mark, a graphic designer. And I did that by organically over time. What happened was, in my case, I was designing artwork. So I met somebody at a podcast conference. We became friends. He had a podcast. I looked at his artwork. He had done the artwork himself. It looked amateurish.
Okay.
So I took it upon myself to design something new for him. And I just gave it to him. I just said, here you go. Here's artwork. Use it if you want. I don't care. I designed it. Anyways, he loved it. He started using it. And then he started passing the name around.
Sure.
I found somebody else that, they had a show, and I thought the same thing. And as a graphic designer, I like to experiment on things.
Yes.
So often, I get a new tool or a program I use, like Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, gets an upgrade, and now all of a sudden there's a new feature.
Yep.
I want to experiment with that feature, figure out how to use it, but I don't want to just do arbitrary things. So I usually actually find something to do. And in this case, I would say, okay, this person has, their artwork can use an update.
Right.
Why don't I experiment with this tool and create something that I can actually give to them?
Oh,
So
I love
for the
that.
first several months or almost a year, I must have given away, I don't know how many podcast artworks to people.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started spreading the word and people started coming to me. So I would give some away, but next thing you know, I'd get 4 or 5 that would come to me asking to hire me.
Yeah.
So that's how I started building up my name, was by giving stuff away. And a lot of people are kind of like, oh, I don't want to give something away because there's a value to it. There's a worth to it. But, if you do it properly, the return is going to be so much more than if you actually charge for that initial one.
And in your case as a graphic designer, because there isn't a hard cost to the product, I mean, yes, it definitely costs you your time.
Yeah.
Right? And you could almost look at that as part of your marketing budget, because like you said, you put one out there and you got 5 back.
Exactly.
Not that you're trading, you're doing it from a good place, a good intention. And it really is a win-win, because this person gets some terrific updated artwork and you get to try out that new feature.
Exactly. And it could be anything. And that was just the way I did it. I mean, companies do this all the time. Lost leaders.
Yes.
If you're a show, like I know a lot of people in the podcast space now. So people that talk about podcasting, sometimes a company will send them, here's a microphone for you to try. And sometimes they get to keep that microphone. Sometimes they have to ship it back, but sometimes they'll get these gifts. The company is giving them a free microphone hoping that they're going to talk about the microphone and other people are going to want to buy it.
Of course.
So it's
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
concept. Sometimes you have to give something away, but then you'll get a lot more in return. And in my case, yes, it was just time. There was no, like, it didn't cost me anything other than time. So it was
Yes.
a lot easier. But sometimes, depending on what you're doing, like if, somebody in your audience is creating a course or they create a digital product that they're going to sell in their side hustle, sometimes they may want to give that away to some people in order to get reviews for it, in order to get feedback from it, and to help spread the word. Just like, when an author writes a book and the book launches and on day one, you look and there's like 200 reviews of the book.
Yes.
Those people that reviewed it all got free copies in advance in order to review it.
Yes.
So in order to sell the book, the author gave out a bunch of copies in exchange for reviews, so that when people go on day one to buy the book, they'll see all these positive reviews for it.
Yes. And all those marketing efforts are focused on that single launch day.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you'd mentioned looking at artwork periodically and see, it's like, okay, that person did them themselves. What did you see that caused you to think, okay, that's not a professional job?
There's a lot of different things that, as a designer, I've been in the design space for 35 years. So I'll look at things and I can't look at anything without critiquing it myself internally.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily say it out loud, but every time I see a poster for something, I'll look at it and I'll critique it or think of how I would do it differently. But a lot of times with the artwork, it was just certain things that look simple, like the font choice. Like they didn't use something that complements whatever their topic is. If you're using a whimsy font, but you've got a serious topic, and they use the whimsy font just because they thought it was cute. Maybe it doesn't have to be cute. Maybe their colors, for some reason, don't meet their brand or the impression you get.
Right.
A lot of times it'll be just the impression of the artwork compared to the podcast itself. For example, when I design artwork for somebody, and this is one of my selling features, is I get on a Zoom call with every client. I will not design something for a client without getting on a Zoom call.
Sure.
I could easily send them a questionnaire. And some of these other people, that's what they do. They send them a questionnaire, fill out this questionnaire. I get on a Zoom call because I want those answers, but I want to see somebody's personality, because their personality will influence how I design the artwork.
Yes.
If somebody comes on, like they have, say, for example, a financial podcast, and they come on and they say, yes, I have a financial podcast and I'm going to talk about the returns and stocks. And, they're very, stiff and professional. I'm going to design it one way. But if they come on my show, or not my show, if they come on the Zoom call and they go, I've got this financial podcast and I can't wait to share this with the world, I'm going to design a completely different artwork for that person. So I want to get the personality. So oftentimes in my case, when I'd look at somebody's artwork, I'd say, like, who is this artwork for? What's the organization? Does the artwork show the emotion of that?
Yes.
So a lot of that, and in the first few cases, I listened to the shows and I said, I don't think the artwork really portrays what they are.
Right, because it has to fit that person, and they have to be proud of it and love it.
Yeah.
I had initial design given to me for my book, The Way Success Works. And it was hip, it was cool, it was the colors that were in at the time, all this sort of stuff. But it totally was not me.
Exactly.
And she's like, but this is what that demographic wants. And I said, I get that, but I'm the one that has to fall in love with it in order to promote it. I mean, yes, my audience has to be able to love it as well. I get that and be attracted to it. But at the same time, I need to have it something that I'm really proud of. And so we worked and came out with the final product, which we were both thrilled about, as did the audience. So it all worked well. But to your point, that's exactly what happened. This isn't me. It's fantastic, but it's not me.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I usually pick up. Now, there's a lot of things like, just technical. Do things line up properly? I'm a stickler to, things line up. If you got something at the top left corner and you got something at the bottom left corner, they should, line up. They should be the same distance from the left edge.
Yes.
A lot. And that's the sort of thing that, as a designer, I've trained myself over the years that, I look at all these little things where other people that are not designers, they may not think of it. They'll put something at the top, something at the bottom. And when I see it, that's off. And so sometimes it may just be little things like that that'll make me think, okay, this wasn't professionally designed.
Right. Yeah.
And
You can't
yeah,
not see that when you
yeah,
look at a piece, right?
yeah, exactly. But the whole thing, I know my case is like I was a graphic designer, so I started a second graphic design business. But what people should know is you don't necessarily have to, like, it doesn't have to be that straightforward, like one graphic design business to a second graphic design business. Sometimes you could do something that's very close to what you're doing, that is kind of a complement almost to the job, like your current job. So again, people, when they want to think of a side hustle, because I know when I talk in to my community, a lot of them want to do something like completely different. And a lot of people say, well, you should do something you're passionate about and that. But passion plays an important part of it, but knowledge is a big part of your side hustle as well. It doesn't matter how passionate you are about something. If you're not that good at it, or if you're not that knowledgeable about it, you're gonna have a hard time creating a side hustle. But sometimes, like, I met somebody just this week. A guy came and knocked on my door,
Okay.
and he was coming out. He asked, he wanted to spray my driveway. We have asphalt driveway here,
Hmm.
and in Canada with the winters and all that, every few years it's a good idea that you coat your driveway. They have this kind of tar material, and they'll if you have any cracks in your driveway, they'll seal them, then they'll spray the whole driveway.
Right.
So in talking with this guy, and this was a young man, probably in his early 20s. And in talking with him, I asked him, I said, "Are you doing this for the summer? Is this like a summer job for you while you're at university or something?" And he said, "No, this is my business." And I said, "Oh, congratulations." I said, "How did you get into this?" And he told me that his parents own a landscaping business, and that specializes in interlocking bricks.
Okay.
And he's worked with his parents for years. And he said over a lot of jobs that he worked with, he kept hearing homeowners say, "I love the new walkway or patio that you did for me, but it connects to the driveway. And look, my driveway looks horrible."
Right.
So to him, in his mind, he saw an opportunity there. It's not landscaping, but it's kind of an offshoot. Like, it's
Yes.
similar. So
Yes.
now when he would go do a job with his parents, working for his parents' company, and if they had a driveway that looked like it could be redone, he could then offer those services. And if they wanted to, then they would pay him. And he told me that he does now 1 month per week, or sorry, 1 week per month, that he works on his business, and the other 3 he's helping his parents with theirs.
Nice.
So that's kind of he started a side hustle that's related to. He saw an opportunity through landscaping,
Right.
and their landscaping business didn't do driveways. So he
Mhm.
thought, oh, I'll start this. It complements the other. So, sometimes your side hustle doesn't have to be that far from what you're
Yes.
doing.
And kudos for him for seeing that opportunity.
Yeah. And
No?
that's it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just an opportunity,
Yes.
but there's so many chances out there for somebody doing something. It doesn't matter if you're a school teacher,
Mhm.
if you're you're a pool cleaner or a gardener or whatever. There's opportunities that you can probably find that are very closely related to
Yes.
that you can start a side hustle in.
Yes. In some cases, in a if a person's employed through a corporation, there's going to be some research needed in terms of there not being a conflict of interest, and
Yeah,
it's okay with your employer, that sort of thing. But it's certainly doable, and we've got lots of examples out there of that.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, if you were starting your podcast graphic design business again, is there something that you do differently?
I would, for one thing, I would try to get the word out even more. I
Okay.
was getting the word out by helping people, and my clients were spreading the word, and I was going to conferences, but uh, just like podcasts. It was only in the last few years that I started guesting on podcasts,
Okay.
and to help spread the word. And it seems like every time I do, I end up picking up at least 1 or 2 new clients that heard me
Yes.
on that podcast.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, just getting the word out there,
Hmm.
because it doesn't matter what you do. People say, like, networking is very important no matter what business you're in. Networking is important. But the thing that people think about networking is, I got to get out there. I've got to introduce myself to so many people, because the important thing is not how many people you know, it's how many people know you. That's where the return is, because you can know a bunch of people, but if they don't really know what you do,
Hmm.
they're not going to be able to help you.
Right.
So you have to get out there and network and explain to people. It's not just, because like around town here, I know a lot of people, but not all of those people know what I do for a living.
Correct. Yes.
So, that's it. So I would get out there, just spread the word more. And that would build it even faster than it did go, just in that aspect. Because when I started doing the guest spots and, I did some blog interviews and stuff like that, though, then all of a sudden the business grew even faster after that.
Nice. Well, what got you interested in doing a podcast of your own in the first place?
Honestly, I got into podcasting through TV fan podcasts. The very first podcast I ever listened to was a podcast it was a television show called Revolution. It was on back in, I think it was 2011 or 12 or whatever.
Right.
And then I started listening to various podcasts about television shows. That was the only thing I was listening to. And then one day I was watching a television show. The television show was Orphan Black. And I watched the pilot episode and I was blown away by it. And I said, I got to find a podcast for it. And I couldn't find one.
Really?
So I waited till the second week. And when episode 2 came out, it's like, wow, this show's so good. I looked and I couldn't find a podcast. After 4 weeks of not being able to find one, I said, you know what? I should start one myself. So one of the podcasts that I listened to, I just reached out to the host. I didn't really know him. I just said, hey, I want to start this thing. Can you help me? Can you tell me what I need to do? I don't know anything about podcasting. And he helped me out. We're now really good friends, he and I. And he helped me get started. So then I started doing television shows. When I first started, Orphan Black was still running. There was like 2 episodes left. So instead of doing that one, there was another show, Under the Dome, based on Stephen King's book that was coming out. I decided to do a podcast on that show.
Yes.
And then went back afterwards and did Orphan Black season 1, spoiler free, and then followed it through. And since then, I've done multiple TV show podcasts. But then I was loving podcasting so much. And I thought, you know what? I'm a graphic designer. I've been running my home-based graphic design business for so long. And when I looked for a graphic design podcast, I think there was 2 active podcasts at the time. There were about 5 or 6 graphic design podcasts at the time, but most of them had already faded or ended. And there was only 2 that were active. And both of them they weren't talking about running the business. They were talking about graphic design in general.
Yes.
So I said, I see an opportunity here. So I decided to start mine in 2015.
Right.
And I'm still publishing today, although not on as regular a schedule as I was back then. But yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to share with people.
How many episodes are you up to now on that one?
I published episode 345.
Congratulations, Mark.
Yeah.
That's a lot of dedication.
Yeah, a lot of talking.
Yes. And I love the fact that you said, hey, I want to do a podcast, but really not having a clue where to start. And you reached out to someone. And I think that's really key. Just because you don't know how to do something, somebody else has done it. They've blazoned the trail.
Yeah.
Pick up the phone, send them an email, whatever it is, reach out to them. The most that person could have said is like, no, piss off,
Yeah.
But it turns out that they were very open and now you guys are best buds.
Yeah. And the thing is even like in 2015, YouTube and that stuff wasn't as popular as it is now. It was still around.
Yeah.
But like anything, if you don't know something and you're trying to learn something, whether it's for a side hustle or just in life in general, if you go look for it, you're going to find so many different ideas, so many different opinions, sometimes conflicting opinions. So I started looking at how to do a podcast, and I was finding, different ideas of what equipment you needed, what setup, what software. So it was just a little bit overwhelming. So that's when I decided, this guy that I listen to, I really like his show. Yes. I like the way he sounds. I like the way he presents himself. I like everything about it. I'm going to reach out to him and ignore all the other advice out there and see what he tells me. And he was really good, gave me a list of everything I needed. And just start off small. Like right now, you see my setup. This is not the setup I started up with, but that way I didn't have all the extra noise to deal with.
Yes, yeah, it becomes overwhelming. I went through that as well, and ended up sitting down with someone who had a successful podcast and say, okay, what is it out of all these things that I really need to pay attention to in those early days?
Yeah, and sometimes you need to do that with anything. You need to talk to people are doing it, because sometimes people will want to start a side hustle. My daughter a few years ago opened up an Etsy shop. She got into doing like pottery, and she thought, I'm going to make some extra money doing pottery. But first of all, it wasn't she enjoyed doing it, but it wasn't a passion. And she started doing stuff, and she wasn't making money. She was doing stuff wrong. So finally she met somebody who was doing really, really well at pottery and making a killing on Etsy, selling a ton of stuff.
Right.
So she reached out to her, asked her a bunch of questions, and then realized that she didn't want to dedicate. Like, this person, that's all they did. They woke up in the morning, they did pottery all day long, and then at night they were putting stuff on. And she says, that's not what I want. I enjoy doing pottery. I don't want to do what they're doing. I'm going to lose the love of it.
Yes.
So she actually shut down her business because that side hustle of her, once she realized what was involved by talking to somebody who is actually doing it, she realized that, no, this is not for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Good realization there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times people will come in and they want something, specific. Like, for example, if they do a financial podcast, they're going to want to have, like, I want a dollar bill, or I want stacks of money to show. It's like, you don't need, like, that doesn't have to be. It's, first of all, it's very cliche. Like, a lot of people, they'll often go with the cliche ideas, but sometimes you can find other ideas that are just as powerful, that are not cliche, and that can sometimes make you stand out. Because when you go for a search for, say, a financial podcast, and you see all these artworks that have stacks of money on them, and all of a sudden you have this other artwork that has something completely different, it can make it stand out.
Do you know what do you know what stands out to me of your homepage, Mark?
What?
Is that very word where it says something along the lines of standing out, and you left the T out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So it reads, do something so that you'll stand out.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that was intentional. Yeah, of course. For that. Okay, he's not going to make that typo. But it sort of stops you because it's this glaring typo that obviously is supposed to be there, to your point. And so that really stuck with me.
And that's it. You've got to stand out. Especially if you're in a crowded market. Like, sometimes people say, like, I want to start, a side hustle doing this, but there's already so many people doing it.
You have to differentiate.
How am I going to succeed?
Yeah.
You're going to succeed because you're different. You're not the same as the other people. And some people will enjoy working with you, or enjoy hiring you, or enjoy your product more than they'll enjoy somebody else's. And you have to find that factor that makes you different and embrace that and stand out with that.
Yeah. As opposed to trying to copy others.
Yeah. I mean, in any niche, whether you're creating a podcast, or you're creating a product, or you're starting a business, you have to be yourself.
I had a mentor, Val Vanderwall. He said, be yourself, but be your very best self.
I love that.
Well, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, Mark?
The easiest thing to do is through my website, podcastbranding.co. I am on the social medias at Podcast Branding. I'm not the fastest to reply on social media, but if you reach out to me, there's a contact form on the website that I'll reply quickly to that.
Excellent. We'll make sure to have that website in the show notes.
Oh, thank you.
So what's your best tip, Mark, to inspire others to start or grow their side hustle dream?
The best thing I could say is it's okay to fail. It's okay to try something and not succeed. Don't not try something because you're afraid of the failure. It's a lot better to look back at something and say, I tried it, it didn't work, than, what if I had tried it? Because, people say, well, what if I do this and it doesn't work? What if I do this and it doesn't work? What if I do this and it fails? What if you do it and it doesn't fail?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can find that out is by going. So it's okay if you fail. Fail as long as you don't stop after the failure. If you keep going, failure is an option, and embrace it.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had failures in your businesses, things that didn't work out, marketing things that you tried, like all of us do. But then that provides you that data, depending on what country you're in, and you become that much more educated for the next step of the journey.
That's exactly. Failure is just a learning experience. Learn from it, move on, and that's it. The only time failure is a failure is if you stop because of it.
Yeah.
Then it's a true failure. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a learning experience.
Like you, I don't want to play that what if game. What if I had started that side hustle?
Yeah. There's a podcaster I listen to, Pat Flynn. For years, he's been saying, I would rather live a life of oh wells than a life of what ifs.
Yeah.
So
Me too. I think you and I are in that camp. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for giving us some insights on how we can look for opportunities and potential side hustles that might be really close to us and maybe we just haven't seen yet. And thank you so much for being today's Side Hustle Hero.
no, thank you very much, Joan. I had a great time, and I hope your audience got some value out of this. And hey, if one of them is inspired, I'd love for them to reach out to me and let me know.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Mark. Not only did he make a compelling case for niching down, but he also shared valuable tips for growing a business, like strategically using free giveaways for great returns. When Mark wanted to start his podcast, he reached out to a podcaster he admired and asked for help. He asked, "Can you tell me what I need to do? I don't know anything about podcasting." This approach is invaluable. When I sit down with seasoned professionals, people who are already achieving the results that I want, I'd like to include the question, what has been your biggest surprise? Or what didn't you anticipate having to deal with or to learn? And I always ask this one, what haven't I asked you that I should have? Because you don't know what you don't know. You're bound to get crucial insights. The strategy isn't just for beginners. At various stages, it's just smart to seek guidance. I did this when starting the show, and now as I'm wanting to level up, I'm doing it again. Learning from someone who's been there, done that, can offer a potential roadmap and a glimpse of how it can be possible for you. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find links to Mark's website and the full show notes at our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you're enjoying what you're seeing in this podcast, it would be so appreciated if you would take a moment and add your comment, share the episode, and please subscribe. It'll let others know that there's valuable content here to help them start or grow their side hustle. Thanks for watching, and hustle on. If you're enjoying what you're hearing in this podcast, it would be so appreciated if you would take a moment and leave a review and a 5-star rating at the platform where you're listening to let others know that there's valuable content here for them to start or grow their side hustle. And do let me know what you think of the episode. You can send a DM on Instagram at Joan Posavy or shoot me an email to hello@joanposavy.com. Thanks for listening, and hustle on. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Mark. Not only did he make a compelling case for niching down, but he also shared valuable tips for growing a business, like strategically using free giveaways for great returns. When Mark wanted to start his podcast, he reached out to a podcaster he admired and asked for help. He asked, "Can you tell me what I need to do? I don't know anything about podcasting." This approach is invaluable. When I sit down with seasoned professionals, people who are already achieving the results that I want, I'd like to include the question, what has been your biggest surprise? Or what didn't you anticipate having to deal with or to learn? And I always ask this one, what haven't I asked you that I should have? Because you don't know what you don't know. You're bound to get crucial insights. The strategy isn't just for beginners. At various stages, it's just smart to seek guidance. I did this when starting the show, and now as I'm wanting to level up, I'm doing it again. Learning from someone who's been there, done that, can offer a potential roadmap and a glimpse of how it can be possible for you. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find links to Mark's website and the full show notes at our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you're enjoying what you're seeing in this podcast, it would be so appreciated if you would take a moment and add your comment, share the episode, and please subscribe. It'll let others know that there's valuable content here to help them start or grow their side hustle. Thanks for watching, and hustle on.